Parshas Vayigash. Before we get actually into the Parsha, I have to go back a little bit. The question arises, why, Jewish people always ask why does Yehuda approach the viceroy, the head of Egypt, who we thought was the head of Egypt, not knowing that it was Yosef? Well, why did Yehuda take the initiative? We go back a few parshas. We know Reuven is the Bechor. In those times, and a lot in these times also, the Bechor, that was a status position. He was the head of the family, after the father. To the Bechor would have gone most of the property, to the Bechor would have gone the kingship, or the leadership, maybe even in this particular case, the kahuna. So the question is, why did Yehuda take the initiative? So we'll get to that in a moment. Let's see what happens with Vayigash. The pasuk says, Vayigash elav Yehuda. This is to the person he thought was the viceroy of Egypt. Yedaber no avdecha davar ba'aznei Adoni. May I say something to you in your ear? May I whisper to you? And please don't get angry at me. Ki kamocha kaparo. You are like Paro. And then for about the next 20, 30 pasukim, he doesn't whisper one thing to who he thinks is the viceroy. He gives him a whole Megillah of the past history. So what was this thing that he whispered? What is this quick message I want to give you so that I have to, Vayigash, I have to lean over and whisper it in your ear? Reuven committed a terrible sin. Yaakov makes reference to it next week in the Parshas Vayigash when he gives the brachas to the sons before he dies, even though the Medrash says Yaakov never died. So, what went on here? Reuven committed a terrible sin. He did something that violated the foundation of family life, according to which Mefarash commentator you want to go, he either rearranged the beds that his father had, or he slept with his mother's concubine, who may have already been Yaakov's wife. Now, where does a son come to do this? It's the worst type of chutzpah and disregard. And for that act, either the interpretation that there was an involvement in the sleeping arrangement or there was a rape of Yaakov's wife, either way, that's a horrible thing, and thereby Yehuda lost the Bechorah. He was no longer given the privileges of the firstborn. He fell out of rank, he fell out of sight, and we pretty much don't hear too much about Reuven anymore. And now, it's Vayigash elav Yehuda. Yehuda goes ahead and takes on the mantle of the head of the family after Yaakov. Now, what is it that Yehuda wants to whisper? What went on behind the scenes is Yehuda and the brothers began to see there's a big problem here. They're not getting their brother back short of military confrontation. And I always enjoyed this parsha, especially when I first learned it as a child, because it mentions me, Naftali. Naftali was the fastest man in the world at the time. He was speedy, Mercury, okay? And the brothers were talking and saying, what happens if we don't get our brother back? So Yehuda became a commander. And he sends Naftali, the fastest man in the world at the time. And I was so proud of myself. I'm a little kid, and I'm the hero behind the scenes. And he sends Naftali to run around, to scout out, to reconnaissance Egypt. Now, how long this took, I don't know. But Egypt is many thousands of square miles. Whatever time it took, it doesn't matter, but it was quick. It was quick. He rushes back with the information, and he tells his brother Yehuda and the others, we could do it. We could take Egypt if we have to. So Vayigash Elav Yehuda, Yedaber no avdecha davar beyoznei Adoni. I want to whisper something to you. May I approach? And, the viceroy says, yeah, why not? And Yehuda approaches and he whispers to him, listen, we are going to destroy Egypt if you do not give us our brother. We are going to go to war against you. We are going to defeat you. We are going to take our brother back. The Torah tells us that when Yosef hears this, he breaks down. He breaks down not in fear of what's going to happen to Egypt. He breaks down because at that moment he realizes how much the brothers love his brother. And the veil of this plan of Hashem to go through all of this so that the brothers come to Egypt and that the exile begins in Egypt, slowly but surely becomes unveiled and everybody begins to understand. So Yehuda, Gur Aryeh Yehuda, Yehuda the lion approaches Yosef, who eventually from him will come Moshiach ben Yosef. And we have the most dramatic meeting of the two Moshiachs. The kingship will come from Yehuda, David HaMelech will come from Yehuda, Mashiach will come from David HaMelech, and we have Mashiach ben Yosef will come from Yosef. So the two Mashiachs approach each other, or are approached, or together, they confront each other. This is earth-shaking. In the spiritual world, this is unbelievable, as it is in the regular world. We have the beginning of the coming together of the tribes, Shiftei Kor, the brothers. The brothers, certainly after Yosef blurts out, I am Yosef, is my father still alive? They begin to realize that all of this was Lamala min HaTeva. God's hand was in producing this whole play in order for this moment and a few more to come. Okay? So now let's further analyze this, and it gets difficult. Reuven sinned. What was his sin? One or the other? Either one, terrible. It had to deal with a woman. Okay? We now go to Yosef. Yosef is sold in Mitzrayim. He goes to the house of Potiphera as a slave. And Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him. And as I said a few weeks ago in that parsha, Vayimo'ein, and it's with a shalshelis. Yosef refuses, and it's with a shalshelis because he's screaming to heaven, no, I'm not doing this. I am not violating the holy relationship, the godlike relationship between a man and his wife. Vayimo'ein, he refused. And to refuse to do something like that during the heat of the moment, during the attempted seduction, that takes a tzaddik. And that's why Yosef is one of the few people in Tanakh who have as almost a second name, HaTzaddik. You always say Yosef HaTzaddik. Okay? That's Tzidkus. Why? As we earlier said, he was able to break the Yetzer Hara. Now we move on. Reuven. We move on from Reuven. We move on to Yosef. And now let's take a look at Yehuda. Yehuda, from whom kingship is supposed to come, also was involved in an Avera of this sort. He's walking or traveling along the road. He sees what he thinks is a harlot, and he goes into her tent and comes out later on that this harlot is pregnant, and the news spreads, and the harlot, who turns out to be Tamar, his daughter-in-law, shows the things that Yehuda left behind, the Simanim, and Yehuda is Modeh. He does a full tshuva, and Yehuda is associated thereafter with real tshuva for what he did, and he accepts the responsibility. We don't hear about Reuven accepting responsibility for anything. We don't hear about Reuven anymore. But the fact that Yehuda accepted the responsibility, the fact that Yehuda did that, that puts him in a special class, worthy of Malchus. Gur Arya Yehuda. Yehuda is a lion. The lion is the king. Now we move to David, who comes from the tribe of Yehuda. David ben Yishai. And we also have these type of problems with David and Bathsheba. There's all kinds of mafarshim that try to whitewash what happened, but the simple fact is what happened with David and Bathsheba. David does tshuva. Chatasi negdi tamid. My sin is always before me. I mean, it takes a great deal of courage, it takes a great deal of emunah to do this, to stand up to these temptations. All three of these men were tempted in one way or another by women. This is the weakness we know of men, but we also know that you can rise above these weaknesses, and therefore the greatness of these three people. After the meeting of Mashiach ben David, the grandfather, Yehuda, and Yosef, that is the first time that the brothers have been united in many years. It's the unification of the brothers when they find out Ani Yosef ha'od Avichai. Yosef sees they're sorry. They starting to feel that Yosef will not take revenge against them, and we begin to have achdus of the brothers. The next time we see this assembly of brothers is when Yaakov dies, and the brothers assemble in a certain plan, a certain positioning, and they leave Egypt to bury Yaakov in Canaan. And this positioning, the way they left, is the way they marched out in triumph from Egypt hundreds of years after the slavery. The next time we ever see an assembly like this of the Jews together is by first by Yaakov's deathbed. By Yaakov's deathbed, everybody by now understands Yad Hashem and what happened during this terrible, terrible period of 22 years separation. The next time after that will be in the book of Shmos by Har Sinai. So here is the beginning, which is rare in Jewish history, a rare time of the achdus, of the unity of the brothers. By the way, if you ever have gone to a museum that shows the Egyptian mummies, which I did, I went to see it in Cairo, I went to see it in London, I went to see Tutankhamun, or however you pronounce his name. These paros, they weren't giants. I would say the well-embalmed ones that I saw, they're no more than 4 feet something. Maybe the height of a boy who's in the 4th grade, 5th grade. So when, Yehuda gets this report of what's going on in the military installations and the size of the army and the general, remember, we're not talking about millions of people in those days. It's no problem. Reuven is out of the picture, but you still have Shimon and Levi from the children of Leah, and they're ready. They have their swords sharpened. So Israel, Bnei Yaakov, come together during this moment of great, I don't like to use the word revelation, but understanding is a better word. They come together, and we have Achdus Yisrael, and from Achdus Yisrael we have strength, we have Gevurah. Shabbat Shalom, V'Shalom al Yisrael, Ubriut.